told him he was wasting them bits or whatever it is for that thing. Steve says, all right, they have a delete button with it. But I'd like to thank Steve for inviting me down. And if I can get through these nerves, maybe we get on with this thing. You know, I don't know about y'all, but when I'm asked to speak, I try to turn it over to God to the best of my ability. But leading up to just before the speaking, when I get really earnest about turning it over, I get in my head and I think about it and get nervous. And Steve invited me to speak down here over 6 months ago. So I've had 6 months to get nervous on you. and I'd like to say, too, that everyone has made me feel so welcome. This is a very, very friendly group. And this group has a good reputation up in the Raleigh area. People know about this group and know it's a solid group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you don't get that just everywhere. Y'all can be mighty proud of what you've done. And I called my sponsor, of course, a couple of days ago. They know I was speaking. And he said, like I wasn't nervous enough, he said, oh, man, said that's Wallace's home group. And I said, well, damn, you could just keep piling on. I've known Wallace 31 years, and he's one of my AA heroes because of the work he's done to help other alcoholics. And I should hope and wish that I could do a fraction of what he's done. And my name's John Stroop, I'm an alcoholic. Through God's grace, because Alcoholics Anonymous works, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since January 21st, 1986. And for that, I'm grateful. And my family's grateful. Some doctors and lawyers are grateful. People out on the belt line in Raleigh are grateful and don't even know to be grateful. I mean, you know, I don't run them off the road no more to cut me off. You know, I just drive my car. You know, y'all told me, it was two kinds of businesses. My business and none of my business. You know, so I'll try not to drive other people's car on the highway, just mine. And so many wonderful tools have been given me because of this program. I was born and raised in Apex, North Carolina. It's a small town just outside Raleigh. Wonderful place to grow up. Very patriotic town. Just about every man on my street was a World War II veteran, including my father and my uncle that lived next door. It was just a good place, about like Mayberry for the world, it really was. And it was just a wonderful place for everybody but John. You know, I thought everybody was against me, and I suffered in that small town horribly of Protestant guilt. And I suffered Protestant guilt right on into many years into AA. And I got a quizzical look from one or two, may not know. You know, when a little Catholic boy does something wrong, they say, what would God think? And when a little Jewish boy does something wrong, they say, what would your mother think? And when a little Baptist boy does something wrong, they say, no, what would the neighbors think? You know, and I come up worried about the neighbors, you know, so everybody was judging me. And I was giving them some things to look at, and there's no question about that. They were narrow-minded, didn't want me breaking the street lights and doing all these things you did back in those days. I look back now, the meanest we did is just nothing like today. I mean, you know, we weren't cruel or anything. We were just mischievous or whatever. My mama, you know, every time I get in trouble, which was right often, she said, well, it's a small town, we don't have a skating rink or movie theater, and them boys don't have anything to do, and this reason he keeps getting in trouble, he's bored or whatever, you know, and, you know, making excuses. People made excuses for me my whole life, and I did too. But I was born nervous, I guess, as long as I can remember I was nervous. I started having panic attacks probably when I was about 5 years old, and I couldn't eat, I was nervous stomach. I was just scared of everything and everybody. And my parents and teachers and whoever would tell me said, John, just be yourself. Just be yourself. And that's extremely good advice if you know who you are. Well, I like Robert Holland. I believed anything you believed if you had the wine. You know, I didn't. If you prayed, I prayed. If you cussed, I cussed. Unfortunately, I hung around with the cussing crowd a whole lot more than I did the praying crowd, but I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and pretty early on there was a guy sitting in a meeting, and this is not in the big book, the words ain't, but the meaning is. So I don't feel bad about using it because the meaning is in the book. But he said an alcoholic was an egomaniac with the inferiority complex. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, that's who I am. Finally, after all those years, I found out who I was. I knew who I was, an egomaniac with the inferiority complex. And that was to be proven out pretty quick. We had a small group that was just starting up, and they just started pointing at people to take positions, and they pointed at me to be alternate GSR. And I thought I'd arrived, and went up to Winston-Salem to the assembly, and went up there, and the lady doing the registration, she asked my name, I told her, and she said, what group you represent? I said, the Apex group. And she said, and where is that? And I felt about that tall. I knew I'd come up there to Winston-Salem and made a fool of myself. Because if you're from a small town, you know, if you're from Southern Pines and you go to Beijing, China, and somebody asks you, where you from, boy? And you say, Southern Pines. I mean, he's supposed to know where that is, you know, if you're a small town boy. So I was real embarrassed, knew I made a fool of myself. And my buddy that was with me, he had pre-registered, and she asked his name. He told Corey Boland, and she pulled his card out and looked at it and said, you represent the Fuqua group. And I thought to myself, poor thing. She's so ignorant she don't know the words Fuqua. If she don't know where Fuqua is, no wonder she doesn't know where Apex is. I mean, I went from being embarrassed and feeling awkward to all of a sudden just far superior than that lady. And she was just doing her service work, and I've learned in that age to try to be just one among many, not to worry about, they told me that being John's good enough because there's no second place for a child of God. And so these things that I didn't get any instruction books on how to live, I don't think, and AA gave me a book called Book Alcoholics Anonymous, which told me how to live, told me how to treat people, how to act and react, and how to lessen these fears. I won't say I don't have any fear. My God, it's 1,000 times better than it was. But I kind of took a wrong turn somewhere. I decided that being a tough guy was how to solve the fear problem. I was searching for God all along, just didn't have enough sense to know it. But, I watched these movies and stuff, and you see Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef and all these tough guys, they just bitten a rattlesnake's eye. They won't scared of nothing, And I kind of got in my head, well, if you're tough, mean, I thought of myself as a gangster, I was an inner city kid from Apex, about 900 people, real tough, and I'm only as big as I am now, so, how tough can you be, But I thought being tough would solve the fear problem, and of course it didn't, and eventually it makes it worse. And I got married at a very, very young age, and my wife that I married, my first wife, was in an abusive home. Her mother had mental illness and had tried to kill her a couple of times and those kind of things. It was bad. And so me and my wife got married, first wife got married when I was 16. And the only reason Mom and Daddy allowed it was they knew the situation that girl was living in. And they'd always wanted a girl to have 3 boys, so they kind of adopted her, the daughter never had. And, I'm probably looking back, looking back, I probably want material enough to be married. But, the first year me and my wife married, we lived with Mom and Daddy, and they played Santa Claus for us. I mean, so, that tells you I probably won't old enough to be married. Mom and Dad still playing Santa Claus for you. But, my thinking was askew. I just couldn't, my mind wasn't good. But I thought that would solve the problem, and it didn't. It added to it. And we went along, and about 3 years into the marriage, we had a child, and I thought, well, responsibility will help. And it didn't. The pressure just made it worse. And I got where I really couldn't eat. I was nervous and weak and just bad physical health. The doctors were concerned about me. And then Uncle Sam sent me a notice to come talk to him. And Uncle Sam, I've already wrapped up in these fears, and it was during the hottest part of Vietnam. And the guys coming back would look at me and say, Stroop, said, you know, a guy your size, said, you'll be a door gunner. Said, life expectancy in battle is about 3 seconds. Said, and one of them would say, oh, you're going to be a tunnel rat. Said, life expectancy in battle is about 3 seconds. You know, and I was like, well, my God. You know. But I went on over there and was always raised patriotic. I didn't take off nowhere. And I went and it was 8 hours worth of testing. And I got through, went up there, and the doctor said, you're a little underweight, and if you want to know what an underweight was, I was 40 pounds lighter than I am tonight. So you imagine how I looked. I was just skin and bones and weak. And he said, you know, it had long chairs, rows of chairs, and they called them boys up there, and they said, you good to go. Walk across St. Mary Street, sit on that bench, and be a bus to take you to Fort Bragg. Congratulations, you're in the Army. And I sat down and heard that over and over, and I got scared and scared, and I got in there, and he said, everything looked real good, you can go home. Well, I won't ask him no questions. I won't go ask him if he made a mistake. I broke for the door. And I wanted to serve my country, but I didn't really want to be a door gunner or a tunnel rat or whatever. And I went over to my brother's house that night. My brother drank. He you know, I don't know if he was alcoholic or not. My Al-Anon wife would tell you absolutely was, but the only thing I know is the things that happened to me never happened. He never lost a wife, he never lost a driver's license, he never lost a job, never was arrested. So, but I went over to his house, and I'm 20 years old, and I've never drank. I was one of those things that, you know, I might have a beer with the guys or something, but I never did drink. And so I was a late bloomer. I was 20, and it was my daughter's first birthday. And went over there and had a little birthday party. And I don't know why, but that night I had several beers. And I didn't get drunk, nothing like that, but it was just the right amount, I guess. All of a sudden, it was like somebody flipped on a switch to life. I felt 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and I had never felt so connected with the earth in my life. I mean, life was just wonderful. It was just, I mean, just those few little beers had just snapped. And after that, I never missed taking a drink till I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, unless I was in the hospital or something where I couldn't get it. But I went home, woke up the next morning, felt good. And that night I ate. Like I said, I was nervous, couldn't eat. I ate hot dogs and onions and all kinds of stuff that I couldn't normally eat. Woke up the next morning, felt great, and told my little wife, I said, I've got a solution to the problem. I'm going to get some beer, and I'll sit down at night and have a beer while you fix some supper and relax and stimulate my appetite. And then we eat supper, and I said, life's going to be good. And I went to the store. I worked at the grocery store, worked at Pig Wiggle and Apex. And, I got off work, I stole a 6-pack of beer. I mean, we didn't have money, you know. And stealing never was an immoral thing for me, per se. It was more of a hobby. But, so I went home, and it worked just that way. I sat down and drank the beer, relaxed, stimulated my appetite, played with the baby. She was a country girl, a good cook, homemade biscuits every night, that kind of thing. And ate a big meal, and I started putting on weight. And I went back to that old country doctor there, and he said, boy, what are you doing? He said, you're in the best shape you've ever been in. Your blood pressure's good, your skin's got blood going to it again. And, you know, he said he was, you know, real happy about the whole deal. And I said, well, Dr. Hart, I drank a couple of beers every night before supper. He said, boy, you keep doing that. Well, that was the best prescription a doctor ever gave me. But the problem was I didn't follow the label instruction. It went from 2 to 3 to 4, and then 5 and not eating. And somewhere around 5, me and my first wife started having problems. And rather than raise my daughter in a bunch of fussing and fighting, I just left, you know. And, went about 6 miles home to Mama. That's where you go, on the mama. And Daddy was dating at that time. And my drinking really accelerated then. To that point, I think drinking, when I drank because I enjoyed it. But it hurt me so bad leaving my daughter behind and my wife of 8 years that I started drinking because I needed it instead of wanting it. And I got a job in a mill. And I don't know if any of you worked in a mill or not, but you work 7 days first shift and take off a couple and 7 second shift and 7 third shift. And that wound me up in the hospital because I couldn't figure out when to drink. I mean, you're getting off at these crazy times and stuff, and it finally just short-circuited, and they put me in the hospital and tried to get me back in shape. I had gone back to not eating, just drinking, and electrolytes were off and stuff, and they wrote down malnutrition. That was the last time they would ever write that diagnosis when I went to hospital. But I told my brother, I said, I've always wanted to be in the Army, and the war was over. I said, I think I'll go in the Army. He said, well, the problem with that, John, is that in the Army they tell you what to do. And you ain't never been big on people telling you what to do. And he taught me to join the National Guard. And I could go off for 6 months and come home again and go on the weekends. That sounded better. And so I went and talked to a recruiter and told him, I said, during Vietnam I was registered 4F. And what that means is the military won't touch you with a 10-foot pole under any condition. You're absolutely unfit to serve military service. And so I called the Selected Service Board, and they said, well, we don't have a draft anymore, it don't matter. I said, well, I'd like to know. And it's a real nice lady. And she come back, and she said, you were turned down for moral conduct. I said, what does that mean? I knew I had never done nothing immoral. She said, it means you're too damn mean to be in the Army. And I think what it was me and my buddy had stole some guns and got caught. And I think when they looked and saw guns there and figured they had a lot of guns, and I'd probably take off with some of them, they said I probably wasn't a good candidate for be taking their guns, being I had a propensity to take them. And so it probably saved my life. I didn't have to go to war. But I went to a recruiter and told him what I found out. He said, you was a teenager, don't worry about none of that. Just fill the form out and they're going to research it. And they came back and gave me a security clearance. I mean, what they call military intelligence. You're too mean to be in the Army during the war, and after the war they give you a security clearance. But all that stuff had gone off the record, it was all when I was a kid, And I went in, it was a drinking fraternity, I just loved it. It was just the most wonderful thing, beer was cheap at the at the NCO club, and you go in and sit down and get a beer for a quarter, and a large cold draft, I just fell in love with the military. I didn't never want to come back home. But finally I did my little time, came back and met the apple of my eye. There in Cary, I was working in a grocery store, and I went to lunch, and there was the cutest little girl I think I've ever seen in my life standing behind the counter. And I hadn't basically ever been but on one date. I married my first date, basically. And I never had sisters. I couldn't talk to girls. I was scared to death of girls. And I finally got my nerve up to walk up there and ask for a phone number. And I got halfway there, and you think everybody in the place is looking at you if you're self-centered, like I was. I got about halfway there, she walked off, and another girl walked up. Well, I couldn't stop then, so I just went on up. And this past January, we've been married 35 years. And we both would tell you in a minute, she'll tell you an Al-Anon story of God done for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. And I know in my case that's true, because there ain't no way in the world I'd marry a woman that would date me. God definitely put us together, and we had a child, and my drinking, of course, got progressively worse and worse. And she wasn't going to Al-Anon, but she didn't need it. She goes to Al-Anon. She's been in Al-Anon for 30 years now, but she was the director before she ever went in, because I'd tell her, I said, I worked for my brother, I was a plumber, and I told her, I said, call Billy and tell him I'm sick. And she picked up the phone, called him, and said, Billy, he was drunk all weekend. He's too bad shape to come to work. I said, that ain't what I told you, They were going to turn the lights out. I said, tell them we'll give them a check in a couple of weeks, And she called and said, my husband's drunk and ain't worked in a week. I don't know when we'll be able to pay you, but we got a child. If you'll keep the lights on, appreciate it, And she just never would buy for me. She didn't need Al-Anon for that part of it, But we were living in a $100 a month farmhouse. And even back then, $100 a month didn't buy much house. Didn't have any underpinning, and when the wind would blow, the linoleum would ruffle up on the floor. And didn't really have any heat. The only heat we had was a tin heater, and you young people don't know what a tin heater is, but a little bit tin heater. You buy it for $10, you use it for 1 year, and it burns out, and you throw it away. If that's all the money you got, you can buy a heater for $10. So we had a little tin heater, and I picked up wood and stove wood. I've gone back and made amends to the fellow for it, and the landlord. And we had an infant in the house and her son, and my daughter lived with my first wife. And I had worked in that grocery store and seen the drunks come in. And they'd get some lard and some flour and a few little things and fill the rest of the basket up with wine or beer and have 2 or 3 little hungry young'uns pulling behind them. And I just hated those people with everything inside me. The very idea of them spending all that money on booze and got hungry young'uns, they ain't going to have nothing but fatback molasses and biscuits for supper again. Well, there came a time in that little house, I went to that same store. I got a dozen eggs, and we had, I think, $5 or $10 left. It was all we had left in the world. The pennies have been rolled, everything's gone. And I get a dozen eggs and the rest of the money in beer. I had become just exactly what I had hated as a young person. And it wasn't because I didn't love my family. It was because I was an alcoholic. That started a series of going to the hospital, which was an embarrassment for my family. First time I went to the doctor, and he said, you need to be in the hospital, and I was still semi-functional in those days, and I drove over there. And went in, they put me in, started IVs and all the stuff to do for drunks. And the next morning, it was cold, it was wintertime, it was rainy, and I got to thinking about that thing. That thing gets me in trouble. I said, I believe I still got a few beers out there in the car. So I get the IV pole, didn't have the electric one like nowadays, it was just a pole. So I get the IV pole, and I'm in my Seymour gown, and go out the parking lot, leave the door cracks for the tube to come in, and crank the car and get a little heat. But sitting there drinking a beer, not bothering the soul. Everything was good, And that nurse come out there, she was hot as a wet setting hen. I was the maddest woman I ever seen, They were trying to save my life, and I'm sitting out there in the parking lot doing the thing that they had, that had caused me to be there to begin with. And they kept me in my usuals 8 days. It took me that long with IV therapy to get my electrolytes and whatever right, and then they feed me a meal and throw me out the door. I found out later from a doctor I told so, and he was in there, he said, John, so they won't keep you long they needed to. So, but the law says once they admit you, they got to be able to feed you a meal and keep it down if you're indigent, and I was, to throw you out. So I'd always wonder why I got breakfast and I'd still be brushing the crumbs off when they were pushing me out the door, But it took like 8 days, and I decided, I don't know if any of you ever done any of this drinking, but sometimes something just seems like a good idea. It really ain't. But your mind's twisted. And I've never cared much about fishing, but I got a craving flung on me. I need to go fishing. And I had been drunk for quite a while and was weak. And I went and stole a card of these poppers that you put on the end of a line, and went to a little farm pond, didn't know who owned the pond. Didn't ask. And pond was in people's yard. And I went out and walked around, called myself fishing and drinking, of course. And I went to cast that little pole like that one time and just followed it and fell in the pond. What the hell, and I got up and stood up and shook myself off. I said, I don't know what that's about. And I fished on a couple minutes, and next thing I knew, I cast out and followed it back out in the pond again. And at that time, I couldn't get up. And what it was, I was just so weak. I wasn't all that terribly drunk. I was just that weak. I'd been drunk that long. And I said, well, I got to have some help. And so I crawled up those people's houses and knocked on the door. And she come to the door, screen door, out in the country. And she's looking. I said, down here. And she looked down there, and she said, who are you? And I told her who it was. My brother didn't live a mile away, and she knew my brother real well. And she said, come on in the house, Johnny. And I crawled through the house, and she said, don't you want to sit on the couch? Because I'm wet and muddy. And she said, don't want to sit on the couch? I said, no, I do better on the floor. Well, I was scared to get high elevation at this point, And I called my brother, and he came and got me and took me back to that little Apex hospital. And the time we got there, after a week, he had to tote me. He's a large man. He had to tote me in his arms like a little baby. And you know how embarrassing that had to be for him. He owned a business there in that small town. He was secretary of Sunday school, board of deacons, and sung in the choir, and had to tote his drunken brother to the little community hospital there. That's what drinking does to the other folks. That's the reason why I go to convention and all. I always go hear the Al-Anon speak. I know about drinking, I know about getting sober. I need to be reminded of those living amends. Let them tell what their side of facing the creditors and all sober. I did it drunk. It wasn't no big deal. But for them, they really paid the price, and my brother paid the price. I just talked to him today. We get along fine because of this program. But, the lady come in to go to high school with my mother, and her son was the lady who become a good friend of mine in AA. And so she knew something about alcoholics. But she came in, and that morning she was fixing to get off, and I'll say it's embarrassing for the family. She went to school with my mother. And she come in, and this Casper said, Johnny, we almost lost you twice last night. And I just didn't know what to say. And she left, and the next charge nurse came in, and I can still see her, a big old woman. She come in there, and she said, you ain't got no business in that bed. You ain't nothing but a damn sorry drunk. And that bed's for sick people. You ought to be ashamed to be in this hospital. Because you ain't nothing but a damn drunk. And I told myself right then, I'll never take a drink as long as I live and have anybody talk down to me like that. The book talks about take an oath with without a solemn oath. And I took a solemn oath that morning. I'll never take another drink as long as I live. To have people look down their nose and talk that hateful to me. So I was raised better than that. And I stayed there 8 days. Finally got me in good enough shape to feed me a meal again. And we lived about 3 miles from the hospital, in that little farmhouse I was telling you about. I believe I'd have got home without drinking, except there was a convenience store about halfway. Now, my wife had been there 8 days taking care of the young ones, trying to work, having to do everything while I was laid up in the hospital. And can you imagine how her heart must have dropped when I walked in the door, toting a 6-pack, drinking a beer. She knew it was on again. I wasn't a periodic. I drank every day till AA. But that was kind of the life we had to live because I was alcoholic. And thank God when I got to AA, they told me, the boy said, you're sick and not sorry. That meant a lot to me. And I met you people, and you were all nice folks. And you started talking about this praying and God. Well, I was raised in the church, but I guess it didn't take real good. And, a couple of years, I guess, into sobriety, I started thinking again. And again, that ain't good for John. The big book tells us don't try to figure out which came first, the hen or the egg. And I started doing that. And I got it in my head, I couldn't think. I said, well, it was obsessed almost. Did God bring me to Alcoholics Anonymous, or did Alcoholics Anonymous bring me to God? I knew I was staying sober only by the grace of God. And I wasn't talking to nobody about it. I just kept thinking, did God bring me to AA? Did AA bring me to God? And me and my wife and a friend of ours went out to see a movie. You'll know this a long time ago when I tell you the movie. We went out to see a movie, and we're sitting there, and near the end of the movie, this fellow's kneeling at his wife's grave. And he said, I don't know if Mama's right, that you don't really know what you're going to get in life, or whether Lieutenant Dan was right, your life's a destiny. He said, but I think it's both. And that was my answer. It was both. God brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous brought me to God. Now, if your biggest spiritual dilemma of your life was solved by Forrest Gump, not to expect a whole lot from me. I mean, I ain't too sharp, And, but they kept telling me, pray for it. Pray about it. Pray about it. And I tell them, I had a lot of problems when I came to AA. I didn't have a damn thing. I don't know how to have a problem. Driving a $20 car, living in the back room of Mama's house. I don't know what kind of problems I had, but I had them. And they kept just telling me to pray about it. And I just met these nice people, and I couldn't tell them I couldn't pray. I would go home and do what they told me to do. I'd go home and they'd try to pray, and every dirty, rotten thing I'd ever done would come from my head. And next, all the things I was probably going to do. And I just felt too dirty to pray. I just couldn't. I was ashamed. And we was sitting in a meeting, and the man wasn't talking to me. Well, he was talking to me through God. I know that today. But he was just sharing in the meeting. And while I was doing well, Robert Hall. Robert said, God don't love me because I'm good. God loves me because he's good. And for the first time in my life, I was able to go home and pray and not feel dirty. That's the kind of things Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. Just those kind of things. I reckon I ought to give a little credence to what Steve was talking about. That's her story, but being you cranked it. Me and my wife had separated. She left. The children needed food and heat. She went home to Mom. I went home to my mom, and she lived in Cary, I lived in Apex. And I'm over there for some reason. She gave me a ride, and we get into a little bit of a fuss on Main Street in Cary. And, of course, the law came and threw me across the back of the car and had the sticks out and being hateful and mean towards me. And I keep telling them I'm the one that got beat up, but they won't listen. And they had me go to the hospital. I went to the hospital, and they wrote so many x-ray orders that finally the nurse looked at me. And she said, sir, were you hit by a car? I said, no, I slapped my wife in the face with a burrito. My wife goes about 240 and got shoulders like a linebacker, and she beat me damn near to death. 5 years in sobriety, I still couldn't figure out why the law had been so hateful to me. And like I said, we were right down on Main Street in Cary. And she said she told me every time, but I wasn't ready to hear it. God wasn't ready to hear it. It said that the reason the law was so ugly got down, I was chasing her around the car trying to stab her. They know they were just dealing with a drunk and a crazy. They, small town. Nowadays, if they came up probably and you tried to stab your wife, they'd want you to go to jail or something, But I think they looked at me and seen how bad I was beaten and said, well, he done had his punishment for the night, And he sent her way and mine. But that's what he was alluding to. I got a wonderful, wonderful wife, a kind, loving, Southern Belle of a wife. She's one of those helpless Southern Belles, about helpless as a cold rattlesnake. But she has looked after and tended to me all these years, and I love her to death. And we have a good marriage. And it's because of AA and Al-Anon that we do. She's strong in her program, and I'm proud of her. She's does real well. I was telling Wallace for the meeting, we were fortunate enough back in the spring to go to the All-Ireland AA convention in Ireland. And I'm sitting out in the lobby, and this Irishman comes over and asks me, said, would you chair third and fourth step meeting for me? And I said, well, I'm American. He said, all the better. And then he stopped and he thought for a second. He said, well, how long have you been sober? I said, 31 years. He said, man, that'll do. So they set me up to chair one of the meetings, and one of the Al-Anon women had cornered my wife to be one of the Al-Anon speakers in the side meeting. And that night we went into the big meeting, and one of them Irishmen sort of motioned me over, and I went over, and I recognized him from being in my meeting. And he said, I just wanted to tell you what a great job your wife did. We both spoke at Mother's Day, I can't remember my name. The retreat we went to.
Crystal Coast.
No, the one with me and Paul spoke at. That back in the spring.
Crystal Coast down there.
No. Anyway, we spoke at some retreat. Huh? We spoke at something down here in this part of the country.
Oh, Camp Monroe?
Camp Monroe.
That's
You
close.
know. Yeah. We both spoke at Camp Monroe this spring, and it was the same thing. You know, everybody coming up. Man, your wife did a good job. We spoke one night in Goldsboro, and I said, you can't tell it now to look at her, but she used to be tall and lanky and beautiful with red lip, long red hair. I paid a price for that for a long time. But you couldn't tell it by looking at her, you know. Unfortunately, the next month she was a speaker down there, and I kind of got a little payback, I reckon. But we have a large time. We go to places, and we enjoy AA, and we enjoy its people. I run around with a little sickness, and because this program works, I was able to get through it. It's just amazing the tools for life that you acquire because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and its people. I had brain surgery and removed part of my brain, you probably can tell, but you know, I came home and it was on my brain stem, and it was pretty serious brain surgery. And I had my wife I was 2 months on the couch without sleeping. All I had was hallucinations. And I got all these get well cards, tape them on the wall, and lay there and think about how lucky I was that people would take time to send John a card. That's Alcoholics Anonymous at work. And, you know, we were up there at Duke, and Alcoholics Anonymous worked there too. Nurse come in, I said, hold on just a minute. She said, what's wrong? I said, that thermostat's shooting a laser beam. And I'm enjoying it. And I know if I looked away, it'd be gone. I knew I was having hallucinations, you know. And she looked at my wife and said, she had a lot of hallucinations. She said, it's constant almost. And she said, it doesn't seem to upset you. I said, ain't the first rodeo. And she said, what do you mean? I said, ma'am, I was sober 2 years before I realized Rex Hospital didn't have rats. I mean, see, anything was won't new for me. I mean, you know, I walked down Raleigh Big one night, and I said, what the hell's wrong with you? You know, Rex Hospital don't have rats. I thought the nurses pretend they couldn't see them, you know, didn't want to lose their accreditation and that kind of stuff, you know. So having an hallucination won't nothing new. I kind of enjoy them sometimes, you know. But that's all. I gained a sense of humor, and I'm grateful for that, because I can go to the Walmart, a Food Line, or wherever, and you look, and there's a lady you can tell is tired, defeated, wore out, checking out your groceries. And if I can pick at her a little bit and make her smile or laugh, for that moment, no matter how bad this old man beats her at home or what's going on, for that moment, she's with God. Well, I don't think you can laugh or smile and not be with God, because that's positive energy for me. So when I go places, I try to think about other people. And it's helped me to get out of John so that I'm not so afraid to go places anymore. When I first come to AA, I was scared to go anywhere. You know, my sponsor took me out to eat, and we walked in the restaurant, and he said, told the waiter, give us that table there in the middle. I like to paint it. And we sat down, and I'm looking around, scared to death, and he said, you wanted to settle down next to the wall, didn't you? You know, he knew about alcoholics. I said, yeah. He said, that's ego. I said, how's that ego being scared and all? I said, how's that ego? He said, you think everybody in here is looking at you, and they ain't. Said they come in here to eat their own stuff, and they ain't worried about you, boy. You know? And I've learned to be able to function in society today because of these things I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, a lot of the fear has been reduced. I'm able to be a functioning member of society, be a good citizen, hopefully a good father and grandfather, hopefully a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know I have a lot of wonderful people in AA in my life and in my corner. And every single one of them is important to me. You know, the longer I stay sober, the better this gets. Every year, and I can honestly say this, every year when I pick up my chip, my year chip, I always pretty much say the same thing, that this has been absolutely the best year of my sobriety. It just keeps getting better and better and better. And I would be crazy not to think that this coming year is not going to be even better. For 31 years, every year has been better. Because when I can, I try to turn it over to God in my understanding. Now, I can't do that 100% every minute of every day. But I have, because of you people and the things you taught me, been able to at least do it to the degree that I can be happy, joyous, and free and have all those promises in that big book come true in my life. It's just, I wish, I don't mean to preach. It's not that. I'm just telling you, you know, I didn't come here to tell you how to work Alcoholics Anonymous. I came here to tell you how I work. And for me, it's been the best thing that has ever come down the pike to me. You know, I've not got a whole lot going for me, or looks, or money, or anything else. But being a child of God, like I said, is not second place to anybody. I enjoy life today. I enjoy being around people. I enjoy coming to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I certainly have enjoyed speaking down here and meeting you nice people. Thank you.